The Mario crew have indulged themselves in various recreational sports over the last few decades. They've golfed, they've tennised, they've Olympicked, they've balled, they've baseballed, and they even mixed that one time. But in this talking head's humble opinion, very few Mario sports games have ever come close to matching the intensity and fervor and fun of Mario Strikers. What other sports games in the franchise can be seriously compared with the chaotic take on the sport of football Next Level Games came up with here? Olympic? Tennis? Golf? Okay, maybe golf, but that's a story for another day. Regardless, even at its most bullshit, or most lacking, for lack of a better term, the Mario Strikers titles were a blast to play then, and are still a blast to play now. As you can probably tell from the length of this video, I've had Strikers on the brain for a good while now, and so I wanted to provide an expansive overview and critique of these three games to show why I believe this crap, maybe even discuss my experiences with playing them, as we've done several times throughout this little sub-series I still have yet to provide a proper title for. Nothing different, nothing new, just a traditional retrospective of the Mario Strikers trilogy. This is not going to be a traditional retrospective on the Mario Strikers trilogy. Oh, we will still be going through each of these games in great detail, don't you worry, but I want to take a different approach to this. Previously, we've discussed how childhood memories that are associated with certain pieces of media can linger in your mind well past your childhood depending on whatever was contained in that media, hence all of those childhood trauma videos, including my own. This was mostly concerning the media itself, though, and during that video I had briefly mentioned that those memories aren't always going to be formed via internal stimuli. There's also external stimuli, forming memories that you have regarding this media that have either little or absolutely nothing to do with whatever is in that media. Like outside incidents or influences, certain states of mind, general phases of one's life, whatever the case may be, can become so intertwined with that media that it can become nigh impossible to disassociate one with the other. And wouldn't you know, the Mario Strikers series just happened to be there during some very, very important phases of my life. So allow me to indulge you, if you would, with a story from those phases of my life weaved within these critiques, which will hopefully explain why these memories are so strongly attached to these games. It's a tale of friendship, loss, passion, and most importantly, the inevitability of change. It's a very personal journey and has been a very difficult one to put together, but hopefully we can learn some new things today, settle some old grievances, upset some randos, and talk about our feelings in the calm, respectful manner that you've come to expect here. We're also talking about the fucking Strikers series, bitch! Let's kick this shit off! I've been to this park many times throughout my life. It's a pretty expansive place, likely the biggest in town, but, well, it's a little empty right now. But trust me, it doesn't just have empty fields, it's got more empty fields, empty baseball fields, abandoned baseball fields, big animal friends, and a bunch of other shit I didn't want to film. There's a mini water park here too, it's pretty sweet. Anyway, I primarily came here when I was a kid. Like many other kids, I got placed in a youth soccer league and learned the true power of teamwork and friendship by standing in front of a goal and getting kicked in the gut more than I ever would have wanted to. Since then, I'd sometimes drive past here to reminisce on those days, but this is the first time I've stepped foot on these fields since my professional youth league days. I didn't really love playing the sport at the time, but I do have a bit of a fondness for it. Although it's likely due to the memories that are attached to it, thanks to an old friend. A friend who will be very prevalent throughout this story, as they didn't just get me into the Strikers series, they got me into video games altogether. But this story does not quite begin with them. For the first few years of my life, I started out with some different friends by way of our next-door neighbor's kids, namely one person who we'll name Haven. We played together all the time, having all sorts of goofy preschool and kindergarten appropriate fun, even if we actually didn't go to the same preschool or kindergarten. But just as we got put into those educational minds, Haven started hanging out with another neighborhood friend, and we'll call them well, that's where the dart landed. Now, I wasn't super crazy about Kirby, and for the sole reason of Haven choosing to play with them instead of me more than I would have ever wanted them to. I know, why would they do that? You only need the one friend in life after all, so I mean, you could say I was a smidge jealous. In spite of Kirby's blatant interference with our friendship, Haven and I were still the best of friends all the way into first grade. I was looking forward to more adventures with them for many years to come and keeping Kirby as far away from us as possible, until Haven and their family moved out of the state barely a month into the school year. Turns out their father had gotten a new job. And that new job required them to relocate to Florida. I know, why would they do that? Well, actually, at the time, I did understand the need to have financial stability in Bush's economy, as any other 6-year-old would, but did it really have to be in Florida? Suffice to say, I was pretty upset about that, and sadly, I never saw Haven again. They were the first victim to what I refer to as the winds of change, leaving a hole inside me that was never to be filled again. Or at least for the next 2 days. Shockingly, Kirby was also upset at Haven's departure, because I guess they were friends after all, and through this shared moment of despair, we put aside our differences to become very close friends. And it was an incredibly fruitful friendship too. Like they had a pool, like we swam there all the time. They had a trampoline, we jumped on that thing all the time. We had none of those things, just a giant ass yard that was a pain in the ass to mow every week, but at the very least was good for playing a bunch of sports on. This, of course, included soccer, and as we grew older, our parents placed us both in those recreational youth sports programs, and soccer was the most enjoyable for both of us. Well, at least for them. We never ended up on the same teams, but we did always find time to practice our skills at home and had a lot of fun doing it. But you know what we also had a lot of fun doing? Now, as I stated elsewhere, my exposure to video games began with a Super Nintendo and a hecking ton of PC games I played on the old Windows 98 computer. But for a time, I preferred playing classic board games like, Monopoly, The Game of Life, and versions of those games for both the SNES and PC. It's really hard to explain why, but I think I was pushed into it because I was very limited with my video game time. 2 hours per weekend day. That was it. Any other day would be spent either watching TV or playing board games or going outside. Ugh, I know, it's scary. But no video games. And look, the SNES is cool, and so were some of those old PC games, but I just really didn't get the appeal of anything beyond that. And that all changed one fateful day, thanks to Kirby. It was during one random summer. I went to their place on some random errand, and what was supposed to be a quick stop ended with me watching Kirby play Mario Kart Double Dash on their Nintendo GameCube. I didn't understand what I was looking at first, and I don't know what the exact moment was, either seeing Mario in 3D instead of 2D and actually saying words, or seeing the high-speed racing action and double dash team item swapping, or hearing Daisy go after she wins for no discernible reason. But what started as a short errand turned into the most defining moment of my early childhood, as I finally understood the appeal for these video games. This obsession was something my parents weren't too privy of at first, but they did get me a GameCube of my very own for Christmas that same year, just as the system was on its death knell. And you know what? It's the very same GameCube I have to this day. And just so happens to be on its death knell. Oh, I'll do something about this later. From there, Kirby and I played a ton of games with this thing. Sonic Adventure 2, the Mario Party GameCube games, the SpongeBob movie game, Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, haha. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. But there was one game in particular that piqued both of our interests. A GameCube game released just weeks before Christmas 2005 and asked us the most enticing question either of us had ever heard up to that point. What if soccer, but with Mario? The Strikers series comes to us from that lovely group of Canadians known as Next Level Games. Formed in 2002 by 4 former members of Black Box Games, a fellow Canadian developer formed in 1998 by former members of another Canadian developer, Radical Entertainment. Canadian game development runs deep, what can I say? The one thing unifying each of these developers, as stereotypical as it may sound, with them being Canadian and all, was the sport of hockey. Each of these teams were responsible for quite a few hockey games that had varying levels of quality, but the one series most relevant here was Black Box's NHL Hitz. Released on all 3 6th-gen consoles at the time, even acting as a launch title for both the GameCube and Xbox, NHL Hitz was a faster-paced, looser, arcadier take on the standard hockey game that was highly praised, sold decently well, and was certainly adored by the 4 peeps at Next Level Games. They had all worked on the series in some capacity before, so it was pretty fitting for their very first title to be the last entry in that series, NHL Hitz Pro. All this discussion of hockey must make it sound pretty weird then, for Nintendo to come knocking on their door for their assistance in crafting a Mario sports title centering around soccer, doesn't it? Well, not exactly, as Next Level actually had some history with soccer games too. Anyone remember Sega Soccer Slam?
Dante scores! That shot was money!
Yeah, you likely don't, but it was important for them nonetheless. For this Mario sports title, though, Nintendo wanted these Canadians to make a nuttier and grittier style than what had been done before. And what Next Level first came up with was some kind of mishmash resulting in a soccer platformer hybrid. Nintendo promptly hit them back with a not that kind of nuttier, and assured them that they were looking for a more grounded, grittier style. So Next Level scrapped their nightmarish concoction and instead drew from their hockey experiences to craft a kind of combat soccer title, like if you can play in FIFA and headbutt people all you want without getting red carded. Once they got the idea, it took about 10 months to develop it, and it was practically ready by E3 2005, so Next Level spent the last half of that year polishing it up in time for Christmas. But you know what else was revealed at E3 that year?
Well, we've got one.
Yeah, remember what I said about the GameCube being on its death knell by the time I got one? Fittingly, Super Mario Strikers was the final Mario-related title released for GameCube in both America and Japan. Mario Party 7 took that cake in Europe, which, funnily enough, was the game that was included with that GameCube I have. Even funnier, though, is that for all the history and nostalgia I have for Super Mario Strikers, I haven't really played much of it at all. Yeah, Kirby and I played some matches here and there for about a month, but it was their copy, and I wasn't smart enough to ask them to borrow their games yet. I only ever picked up a copy of my own about a decade after the fact, and it was completely covered in dirt and grime, and the disc was all scratched to hell. Yet it worked perfectly fine, unlike some other GameCube games I could mention. Anyway, yeah, coming back to this first title was going to be a very, very interesting time. Before we get into it though, let's lay down the basics on how these combat soccer games work, as they're mostly consistent across the series. You have two teams consisting of 5 players pitted against each other. Each team has 1 captain, 3 sidekicks, and 1 goalie. The captain is one of the star characters you see here, with the sidekicks being one of these 4 types. As with any soccer or hockey game, your goal is to try to smack the ball into the other side's goal more times than they smack the ball into your own goal. The Mario-centric aspects come in the form of items that are provided to either team at various times throughout the match. Your banana peels, green and red shells, bomb-bombs, standard Mario affair. But the combat aspect is where things get really interesting. Those involve being able to tackle or slide into any member of the opposing team at any time, whether they're holding the ball or about to get the ball or just in the way or just an easy target. Tackling is more powerful but sets the ball loose across the field, whereas sliding always nets you possession, provided they don't shimmy themselves out of the way first, and if you do hit an unsuspecting player who doesn't have the ball, the other team gets an item as compensation. Oh yeah, and each of the stadiums are surrounded by these electric fences that'll short-circuit any sad sack who gets yeeted into them. Whoever gets the most goals after time runs out is the winner, and if it's tied, you go into overtime, and the winner is whoever scores the next goal. All of these elements coming into play makes the game a big, chaotic mess. Much closer to a game of hockey than soccer, frankly, and that's the appeal of the series. One moment you could be dribbling the ball with nary an opponent in sight, and the next items could be flying across the field, players left and right are getting ganked, and the ball's just being tossed about with no rhyme or reason. I haven't even mentioned how most of the items have a larger version of the standard 3-shot ones that will just absolutely wreck opponents, as does that fucking Chain Chomp, that star, and Bowser himself, who randomly appears during matches to wreak havoc and even change the incline of the field to literally tip it in one team's favor. It's nuts. And playing a single exhibition match to get myself reoriented with the gameplay, I can conclude it is still very, very fun. The control layout works perfectly, movement is super smooth and responsive, the aesthetics are on point, and oh my god, it is oh so satisfying to smack that ball right past the goalie into that nylon cage. Especially when they make the highlight reel at the end of each match. God, I love those things. Speaking of which, there is the matter of actually making that very thing happen. And it's one of the more interesting mechanics of this series I've observed in replaying these games for this retrospective. Neither goalie can be directly controlled except for when they have the ball. And regardless of what type of normal shot you make, you can't control the direction the ball goes towards the goal. What you can do is hold down the shot button to charge the ball before taking that shot to give it a higher chance of making it into that goal. But there's also the perfect pass, where you make a pass to another player somewhere near the opponent's goal and it gets enveloped in a green glow. If you attempt to make a shot here, the game will slow down for a moment before the player thwacks that ball towards the goal with more power than most of the other shots. letting it either sail through or potentially incapacitate that Kremlin goalie, which opens up a chance for a free shot. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that many of those shots are just that, shots. You can manipulate the chances of making that shot as much as you want, but you will often be bound to the mercy of the goalie's RNG, meaning you could have the best shot opportunity possible with a long rally between players resulting in the beautiful lob pass that appears to have absolutely no chance of missing, and the goalie just blocks it with ease. Meanwhile, a quick shot from the very middle of the field could be sent straight in without the goalie so much as laying a finger on it. It isn't completely random, as I just demonstrated, and the closer you are to the goal, the less of a chance the goalie will be able to get into their animation cycle to block the shot again. But again, any shot could potentially be a goal. So my advice to you, if you're looking to win in any match, is such. Take a shot, take a shot, take a shot, and every time I tell you to take a shot, I want you to take another shot. Do whatever it takes to get the job done and get that fucking ball in there. I imagine this sounds worse than how it actually is. It's really all moment-to-moment quirks in the gameplay amidst the bajillion other things that are going on to keep it together. But when you play any game long enough, you start to notice these quirks. The only guaranteed way to get goals is with the Super Strike ability, which all of the star players have. This is activated by holding down that shot button for longer than the standard charge shot, after which you're presented with this little meter. You'll then need to press the shot button right when the white needle is in either of these colored areas you see here. If you get it in the yellowish area, it won't go in, but it will stun the goalie temporarily like a perfect pass shot will. But if you get the needle in the green zone, the shot will be blasted into the goal and you get not 1, but 2 points for your effort. And if you don't get the needle to any of the areas, the goalie will either catch the ball without a problem or nonchalantly throw the flaming ball of doom right back into your stupid face. And you'll probably be seeing that a lot since you have to time your button presses within the span of like a second. The one real issue I have with these controls. So that's how these games work. Pretty simple, pretty crazy. But what else does Strikers offer beyond those exhibition matches? Well, you have a basic tournament mode where you pick your team, play a bunch of matches, and if you win enough matches to stay in the top 3 of the league, you'll get that tournament's trophy and unlock the next one. It gets increasingly difficult as you go through each cup, and when you get to the Bowser Cup, if you rank high enough after the main batch of matches have concluded there, you get sent to the brackets for another few matches with the top teams. If you don't place high enough in any of those tournaments, or lose in any of those bracket matches, you're forced to start the whole season over again. But the strategy of shoot, shoot, shoot usually worked well enough for me, so I didn't have much trouble getting through it. If you're not doing so hot though, you can cheese this mode by resetting the console so it sets you back to the beginning of that match rather than the start of the cup. You can even set the options to make those matches last a mere 2 minutes if you're trying to rush through them. I, for one, didn't feel the need to resort to such tactics so that the authenticity of my wins can never be besmirched, but I just wanted to point it out for anyone who happens to be having those problems. So you have these regular cups, and then you have the super cups, which are pretty much the same deal, just with tougher opponents. And then you have the unlockable achievements that subsequently unlock cheats to use in those exhibition matches, and are best acquired by going through the cups over and over and over and over again. And that's it. Yeah, it's a bit lackluster, wouldn't you say? The small amount of single-player options has been the biggest sticking point throughout the entire series. And while one can argue that these games are best experienced with other players, so not having substantial single-player options isn't that big of a deal, others could argue that other Mario titles released before Strikers have had such options, so the devs have no excuse. For what it's worth, I had a lot of fun doing all the solo stuff, but the small offerings on display here do lead into what I believe is Strikers' biggest issue overall. It's lacking in variation. Take the stadiums for example. Each area is functionally the same. All of them have the electric fences, a big rudimentary looking crowd, a low contrast, low saturated look, and if you play one of them, you've played them all. You can at least look at them in 16:9 widescreen 480p progressive scan resolution, making this the only Mario game on the GameCube with that feature, but I don't know if anyone really cared that much then, when the system was one foot in the grave, or all these years later. Personally, it was quite helpful in recording the game natively through component cables, but I digress. Team selection is also kind of scant. Like, you have the main people you'd expect in any Mario sports game by then, but you can't mix and match your team with different captains or sidekicks like you could in, say, Mario Baseball. You get the one-star character and 3 of the same type of sidekick, and that's it. And it doesn't help that, just like with the stadiums, there's really no discernible features between them. Yep, don't let the descriptions fool you for a single minute. Every character in Sidekick plays the exact same way. They all have the exact same speed and the exact same strength. Wario can move as fast as Peach. Toad can hit as fast as Daisy. Yoshi hits the ball just as hard as Birdo does. The only thing differentiating each character is their look and size, and consequently, their hitbox. And even then, I did not find it any harder to smack into Waluigi than I did DK or Mario. It's very similar to the issues that Frank Thomas Big Hurt Baseball had. You didn't expect that thing to come back anytime soon, did you? Because without any true distinctions between these players, there's no strategy in configuring your team and balancing those strengths and weaknesses. And all it does is contribute to the eventual repetition this game has much quicker than it seems like it should. When even controlling the monstrous super team doesn't feel all that different from controlling Daisy, there's a big problem on your hand. Oh yeah, the super team. After you reach the end of the Bowser Cup, you are greeted by these 4 humanoid-looking robots created by Bowser himself in order to stop you from winning the cups. The Koopa Troopa may not be playable, but he ain't just gonna sit around as some random stage hazard. No, he's still gotta put some effort in to stop the best Mario Striker team from becoming the best Mario Strikers team. And completing that cup nets you the ability to play as these robots in exhibition. Presuming you haven't already done so via this handy exploit. So while I enjoyed my revisit of Super Mario Strikers, and I believe that it has held up pretty well, given where the series went from here, there aren't a whole lot of reasons to revisit it outside of looking into the series' roots. Next Level had come up with a great concept, and they focused on polishing that concept for the majority of the game's development at the expense of some very key areas. Perhaps that's why Kirby and I didn't play it for very long. Or maybe it was them kicking my ass in every single match that we played together. Following its release, Super Mario Strikers was critically received well, and sold surprisingly well. Somehow it ended up being one of the best-selling GameCube games, and the best-selling sports title on the system too. Yeah, I know, it's the GameCube we're talking about here, and a Mario spin-off at that, but for a game released so late in that console's life, that's an impressive feat. Young me wasn't so concerned with the sales figures though, as they were too concerned with being in the throes of a new obsession for the rest of elementary schooling. Following our little excursion with Strikers, Kirby and I kept being good friends throughout elementary, and kept doing all sorts of good elementary friend things, including us going crazy about that next big console from Nintendo, the Nintendo Wii. Guess who got one first? Somehow. Because we were such good friends, though, Kirby was merciful enough to allow me to play on their fresh new Wii system, and God, was it magical. Even after I launched the Wii remote into their living room wall while playing Wii Sports Baseball. Regardless, I definitely wanted one of these things. And one of these things we definitely got. I got to experience the joys of Wii Sports and Wii Play in my own living room, and thankfully no walls were damaged this time around. And Kirby was also gracious enough to lend me their copy of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess after I saw them play it one time and thought it looked like the sickest fucking shit ever. And it was. I was so obsessed with that thing, I got to the point where I was watching an AMV shipping Midna and Link to the tune of Counting Crows accidentally in maybe I should have kept that part to myself. Once again, life was pretty good. Especially since there was a new Mario Strikers title that had come out right around the time we got our Wii. But it took about another year for me to get to that because, while Twilight Princess was nice and all, that wasn't the obsession I was talking about earlier. Oh, you fucking rat. I'm not exaggerating when I say I was engulfed by Pokemon during this time. I got the trading cards, I read the Scholastic books, I played the electronic handheld games, the DVD board games as well, and I watched the anime religiously to the point where I was shipping May and Ash thanks to that Pokemon Ranger in the Temple of the Sea. Okay, you know what? Don't lie to yourself. You've done this too when you were a kid. Some of you. A few of you. At least one other person watching this video besides myself. I could not get enough of this franchise, and yet not once during this period had I ever played any of the games. Like, I legit thought Pokemon was just the show and nothing else. Once I realized that wasn't the case, my obsession only grew, but my first attempts at getting into the games were a little spotty. I didn't have a GBA or a DS at the time, so I couldn't play any of the modern games, nor was I smart enough to go to a used game store to get one of the older games for my old-ass Game Boy, so all I could do was leech off of other people who had it. This was not nearly enough to satiate my desires, though, so I bit the dust and just got someone to give me their copy of Leaf Green, and when my stupid ass tried to fit that thing into my Game Boy and realized it was not going to work, I did the sensible thing anyone would do in that situation and cried for a full hour. Okay, don't lie, this is where you'd think Kirby would come in with the save, but not in this case, because they did not share in my obsession with Pokemon. That didn't end our friendship or anything, it just meant I needed to find another friend who would share in that obsession. And this is where our next character comes in, who we'll call... Ocean? Who the fuck calls their kid Ocean? Okay, no, just redo it. Johnny. Okay, sure, yeah, let's go with that, Johnny. Johnny had transferred into our school a little bit into our final year there, and initially I thought they were kind of annoying. In a short time, however, we found we had one thing in common that sealed an instant bond between us, and that was our mutual love for Pokemon. That's all we would talk about. Nothing but Pokemon. They brought in their Pokemon cards, I brought in my Pokemon cards. We'd have imaginary Pokemon battles with characters from the anime during recess and make up all sorts of stupid moves. It looked really, really lame to everyone else, but we were happy. Even better, they had a DS, and the then latest entries in the Pokemon series, Diamond and Pearl. And while they couldn't bring that shit to school, they sure as hell could bring the official Diamond and Pearl Pokédex Prima guide. To clarify, this isn't a guide for how to get through the game. This was a guide for completing the game's national Pokédex. It featured all the Pokemons in the games up to that point, their stats, how to obtain them or bring them over from previous games, and a shit ton of advice and features that may not be super useful anymore thanks to the internet, but man, did I read this thing from front to back multiple times. Given everything else, it really felt like this was the closest I was ever going to get to playing Pokemon. I mean, yeah, they let me borrow their copy of Diamond and had action replay in it as well to just kind of let me fuck around, but that's besides the point. We were destined to be friends forever and Pokemon away to our heart's content. Or so I had thought. Sadly, our friendship wouldn't even last a whole year, as that following summer, Johnny and their family had moved away to Florida. As far as I could tell, their circumstances weren't great, but like with Haven, I never saw them again. The winds of change had taken yet another victim, but as a parting gift, Johnny gave me the very thing that supported my Pokemon addiction throughout our brief friendship. And it is the very same guide that I still have to this day. It's seen better days. So if you're still out there, Johnny, and you're watching this somehow, thank you for being my Poke friend. What does this have to do with strikers, you dumb fuck? Sorry, I'm getting to it. Shortly following Johnny's departure, I was at a birthday party that featured a distinct lack of Pokemon, so not much stuff there was keeping my attention. Until they booted up their Wii and went, "Hey, any of y'all want to play the new Mario Strikers game?" And I was like, "Pardon me, good sir, there's a new Mario Strikers game? Heaven forbid, you must be joking, my good man." In a perfect British accent. This is an actual true part of the story, please believe. Keep in mind as well that I have not played much of the original game beyond Kirby mulching me into the ground, but I was still very, very interested in trying out this latest entry. And all it took was a single match for me to get hooked. So as my own birthday had been coming up, I asked my super cool grandpa, rest in peace, to get me this game and something else. And because he was a super cool grandpa, he did just that. So here's where the fun really begins. The first thing to point out is how Super Mario Strikers was released less than a year before the Wii's launch, and Mario Strikers Charged was released less than a year after the Wii's launch. Pretty quick turnover, huh? Indeed, Charged had been greenlit soon after the first game's release, and Next Level spent about as much time developing this as they had with the first one. It was officially announced as an official Wii title in the summer of 2006 during Nintendo's Game Convention conference, and then released the following year. According to their director, they spent most of Charged's development adding in mechanics left on the Strikers' cutting room floor, which would hopefully inject some depth to those already polished mechanics and make each character and stage far more distinct, while changing up the presentation to make the whole affair seem like some ridiculous post-apocalyptic alternate universe. Those were the vibes I always got when watching this cool-ass intro, and that feeling continues into the main menu, which looks far less bland than the PowerPoint-esque one from the previous game, so far so good. But if they had just prettied up the exact same game and called it a day, it wouldn't mean shit. So let's see what exactly has changed in the last year and a half. The base mechanics for each match are still the same, 2 teams of 5 facing off against each other, each with a captain, 3 sidekicks, and a goalie, and whoever knocks more goals into their opponent's net is the winner. Right off the bat, selecting these characters for these teams shows that Next Level were definitely not lying here. For instance, Bowser is actually playable now, and they added some more sidekick types too, that's pretty cool. Oh, what's this? What do I see here? Are these unique stats for both the captains and sidekicks? And you can now mix and match your sidekicks as much as you want? Now, this is all well and good, but we're gonna have to get into a match here to ensure these stats aren't more smoke and mirrors. Nope. It's not. It very much is not. Speed, passing, shot power, tackle strength, tackle reach. Each character has different levels of each attribute depending on their playstyle, so now you have to find the right balance between those characters for your team to complement the strengths and make up for the weaknesses. You may even have to go as far as to consider their positioning on the field. Although they still just kind of run around wherever, so positioning doesn't really matter that much, which is fine. It's not like this is FIFA we're playing here, but I do appreciate there's now some strategy in choosing these positions. It's also during the match you'll notice an immediate difference with the ball itself. Certainly more metallic compared to the normal-ass soccer ball from the original game, but that's for good reason, as this ball needs to be charged if you want a good shot at making a good shot. You heard me right, by either passing the ball between players or holding down that shot button, it now goes through 5 phases of charging that range from weak-ass purple to strong-ass white. And the closer the charge is to coming, the higher chance you have of making it into the goal after you boot it into the... yeah. It's not really that different from how the shot mechanics work in the original game, and the goalie RNG doesn't feel that much different either. But at least there's now variety in shot power and visual indication of such too, beyond the green glow. Control-wise, you more or less have the same moveset from Strikers, but Next Level were really smart with it. Keep in mind, this was released within the first year of the Wii's long life. So you might think that Nintendo would pressure them into putting as many of the console's features and gimmicks into the game as possible. that is not entirely the case. There are motion and pointer controls, but they are only used where absolutely necessary. Such as... Fellas, I cannot stress how much this mechanic alone put charged far beyond anything the original game was doing. The satisfaction one gets by smacking another player holding the ball as the game goes into slow motion and they're violently thrown into the electric fence, all with a mere flick of the Wiimote, is unmatched. And the violent fun times don't end there, as we once again have the classic Mario items being strewn about the playfield. Most of them being the same and all of them being acquired the same way, but the biggest addition with those are the super abilities, those being character-centric items that have different effects depending on the character and their class. Mario and Luigi grow big and stomp around the playfield, crushing anyone in their path. Yoshi rolls around in a big egg for a similar purpose. Bowser spews fire and sets anyone stupid enough to be in front of him ablaze. DK and Daisy smack the ground to knock back anyone around them, while Luigi makes a giant vine wall to block opponents from reaching them. Wario farts out gaseous clouds that are so noxious it will disorient any poor sucker who runs into them. And my personal favorite, Peach does a literal freeze frame and traps anyone caught in the flash within Polaroid stasis. And it does not end there either, because while it's really funny to pull off any of these moves, they're meant to be used for creating scoring opportunities. Especially for using this game's equivalent of the Super Strike, the Mega Strike. Activating it works the same way it did before. You just hold down the shot button until the meter appears, except instead of simply going for 2, you now have the chance to go up to 6. Yes, 6 goals. And for as difficult as it is to pull off, that would still be unbelievably cheap without any way to defend them. So Next Level gave Kremling here a boost, and this is where the pointer controls come in. You point the Wiimote at the screen and tap the A button to destroy any incoming balls, which sounds simple enough, but depending on where the needle in the Mega Strike meter landed as it swung back, you're gonna need to be real quick with the pointer lest you allow any balls to pass you by. It's a longer process than the Super Strike was, but it is still far from a pace breaker considering both sides have some agency here. And I love Kremling's reactions after he finishes his counters, either by showboating his prowess or getting hopping mad depending on how well you did. But those aren't the only special shots he'll have to worry about, because the sidekicks have their own. These skill shots are used for a similar purpose to create scoring opportunities or just make a straight up goal, but I'll spare you the rundown here and just list my personal favorite of them. Birdo, who just shoots a giant ass fucking egg that flattens everything in its path, including the goalie. Yeah, don't think about this too hard, kids. And we're still not done here, because in addition to all of these new character attributes and moves and sexual overtones, Next Level provided some variety with the stadiums where all of this madness takes place in. We still do have some of them just sporting an electric fence and nothing else, but now there are ones that have tangible effects on the gameplay. Take Thunder Island, for example. This one doesn't even have a fence and takes place during a series of massive storms where all manner of shit gets swept up and flown about, and should any players run into the carnage, or just run too close on the edge, they'll get knocked off and won't return until the next storm carries them back. Or the Sand Tomb, which has 2 layers of sand on the top and bottom that'll slow any players moving around in it to a crawl, and the center portion that has more maneuverable ground, as well as a bunch of thwomps that will flatten any unsuspecting players if they're not careful. And then there are the Wastelands, quite possibly the most insane course in the entire game. This here is a giant field of ice where everything and everyone is slipping all over the place, the ball included, and just for kicks and giggles, there are completely random lightning strikes that'll zap the ball and any unfortunate soul near it. Man, these Canadians are cracked. I could go on and on about what's been added or what's been changed between this and Strikers, so I will. The deeks you use to dodge incoming tackles or slides now have their own characteristics depending on the player, and now each character in stage has their own musical theme too, a few of which are some of my favorite game tracks to this day. then there's the excellent character animation that's been retained here with even more celebrations for each character, as well as one showing their anger or despair whenever they get scored on, or these cool newsreels that show up after the game summarizing the highlights. Oh, and the highlight reel, which is even cooler now. Next Level improved upon the first game's formula in every conceivable way and added some much needed depth to the gameplay proceedings. And the fact they did it in such a short amount of time is just fucking crazy. Yes, there is a good amount of recycling from the first game, down to including all of the original stadiums, and yes, the balance has been thrown off considerably, like there are a handful of team combinations that will absolutely wreck the game. But it's just so much fun to play, so much fun to watch, so much fun to get mad at. It all works perfectly. And it was a multiplayer mainstay for my siblings and I. We played so goddamn much of it back in the day. I honestly think it's one of the best multiplayer experiences on the system. But you didn't just have to relegate yourself to the comfort of your own home or local friends. Oh, no. Mario Strikers Charge was also one of the first Wii games to feature online multiplayer via the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. It was a rather expansive one too, featuring ranked and unranked matches, a Striker of the Day spotlight for whoever scored the most points for that day, the ability to play with friends using those stupid friend codes. I can't really demonstrate how well it works from my end, as it's been nearly 10 years since Nintendo Wi-Fi went Nintendo bye-bye, but I'm sure it was similar to everyone else's experience. So yeah, it's a pretty good game. And all that's left now is to dig into those single-player options. As previously stated, the insubstantial content in that regard was one of the biggest criticisms for the original Strikers. So naturally, Next Level would be fixing this alongside all of the other fixes and improvements they've made too, right? Well, kind of. Charged offers 2 dedicated single-player modes, the first of which is the Road to the Strikers Cup. It's very similar to the Cup challenges from Strikers, where you have to play a bunch of matches and win those matches to qualify for the postseason brackets, and like before, if you don't qualify, or if you lose during those postseason matches, you gotta start all over again. But this time, you ain't doing it just to unlock virtual trophies or those cheats. There are 3 unlockable characters and stages behind this mode, and completing each of the 3 tournaments will net you those rewards. Sounds easy enough, right? Well, kinda. No, it isn't. It very much is not. Or at least by a certain point, it is not. Let's just go through this here. You have the Fire Cup, 4 teams, 6 matches, 1 postseason match, and 1 best-of-3 final with the unlockable character here, Bowser Jr. Matches were a complete breeze, as you can plainly tell, so I got through this one with ease. Then you have the Crystal Cup, 6 teams, 10 matches, 2 postseason matches, and a best-of-3 with the unlockable character here, Diddy Kong. Things did get a little dicey here, especially with the gimmick of this unlockable stage being characters getting eliminated right off the pitch, but I did get through it without too much struggle. Not that big a deal. Lastly, there is the titular Strikers Cup. 9 matches. The game cheats. It just fucking cheats. Whereas the lower difficulty opponents felt like they were holding one collective brain cell, these guys were 5 steps ahead of me at all times, and aggressively so. They will use tackles and steals and items to get the ball away from you during every opportunity they can get, sometimes feeling as if they're faster and have a higher chance of scoring goals on you by default. Of course, if you try to do the same thing to them, you'll find that they will swiftly deke out of the way or shot the ball to another player for many a hit and perfectly maneuver around most items you throw at them. Oh, and even during the Mega Strikes, which are already RNG driven against the CPU, the goalies now have a better chance of blocking every single fucking shot you make, even if you're dead accurate with the meter. How? Thanks to this, matches are further whittled down to straight up luck. It all depends on what stages you get, how specific effects play out, which opponents you face, which combination of sidekicks they have. It's practically a roguelike. It becomes a desperate fiasco for almost any match, for when things go horribly wrong, and even when things go right. And what's worse is that you can't even rely on save scumming like last time. If you're playing a match and you just shut the game off thinking you're going to be able to restart from it like you did before, it will count that as a loss. You simply cannot outsmart this game. And nowhere else is this more evident is an inexplicably tough character to fight, even on lower difficulties. They're slipperier than anyone else, making them hard to hit, and they've got an aerial mud attack for their super ability. Combine that with a team that's somehow more aggressive than any of the ones beforehand, as well as a stadium whose gimmick is tilting towards the side with more players on it, as well as those random bursts of electricity running through the ground, just like with the Wastelands, you can see why my 12-year-old ass did not do well with any of the matches. Try as I may, I was left with a big Strikers Cup-shaped hole for the longest time. But now, maybe with my adult mind and complete gamer license, maybe I could... Nope, it's still fucking impossible, and failure here meant doing it all over again. And I got close so many times, but I just could not make it. Call me Joe Burrow, because I could not complete the clutch. By the 7th attempt, I just couldn't take it anymore. I'm sorry, guys. I needed some closure here. So I had to resort to the ultimate striker's sin. Unsurprisingly, many folk online were just as frustrated with the unfair difficulty on display here as I had been, and some real smart people came up with the real easy strategy to get past that shit. Goalie camping. Essentially, you get a goal very, very quickly, get the ball back, and then you sprint to the front of your own goalie so that A, they'll auto-attack any players who get close to you, and B, immediately snap up the ball should you get slammed. Rinse and repeat until the end of the match, and you are good to go. Is this considered cheating? Is this considered exploitation? Probably, but it lets you do without penalties, so I don't give a shit. So what if I get kicked out of the Strikers Veteran Club? I need to get this cup. So I gave the strategy a shot. Granted, I shouldn't have been standing right in front of the goal where the ball could have rolled in easily, but this still didn't make for the best first impression. However, after a few more attempts trying to pull this off, to my amazement, it actually worked. With this knowledge in tow, I finally made it back to PD for the 90th and hopefully final time, and it started out pretty similar to the last couple of attempts. I handily won the first match, barely lost the second one, and so this third match would decide it all. Luckily, I managed to get a goal scored early on, so now was the time to burn out the rest of the clock with this goalie camping strategy. There were several points where this could have gone awry, but me and my goalie managed to hold on until the very, very end to finally beat Petey and snag that Striker Cup. 15 years of unresolved pain, all for this. And I gotta admit, it felt pretty fucking good. So yeah, this mode's fine. The only other mode they added were the Strikers Challenges, where you go through a whole bunch of scenarios that increase in difficulty along the way, and each one you clear nets you a new cheat to use in the exhibition mode. Okay, I did not expect to be bringing up Frank Thomas Big Hurt Baseball again, but these challenges play out the same way that game's clutch time events played out. And the scenarios are stuff like, you gotta win a shutout, you gotta come back from a big deficit, you gotta win by a large margin, you gotta win while being down a player. And if you fail any of them, you gotta start them all over again. After the ordeal that was the Striker Cup, these were a total breeze. Kind of. One such challenge lasted about an hour longer than it should have, as this here required you to come back from 5-0 while fighting against the very, very aggressive AI, also making its comeback, all while taking place at that fucking sandpit arena, the ultimate comeback. It was rough. But with that out of the way, the rest of the scenarios were a cakewalk. Like I said, a cakewalk. And that's it for the single player stuff. It's either these two modes, the way too buffed up online matches, or just buy yourself an exhibition. Like last time, Mario Strikers Charge really shines in multiplayer, and for as frustrating as the game can get, I will repeat once again, Next Level really upped the ante here. Now, critical reception was only a bit more positive overall, but it sold significantly better. The perks of being a first-party game released during the first year of a console's life. To this day, Charge is my favorite Mario sports game. Okay, you know what? No, it is my favorite sports game. Y'all can keep your Maddens and your FIFAs and virtual tennises and MLB The Shows. I just need Mario and friends going apeshit in a soccer hockey field for 3 minutes, and I am at peace. I could not wait to show this off to Kirby, I thought. I'm sure they were going to love it. As fun as Charged had been during the summer, it was not going to help me in any way whatsoever with the daunting horrors of adolescence. Middle school was coming up to the pitch, and I was going into it with one less friend. But at least I had a new obsession to balance out with my other obsessions, and a longtime friend that I knew for sure would share in at least one of those obsessions once again. We may not have had any classes with each other for like the third or fourth year in a row, but that wasn't going to stop me from striding right up to them in the hallway in between classes to say hi. To which I got no response. Okay, that was weird. Maybe they didn't hear me. I'll try again after the next class. These next few attempts went about as well as the last few had, but eventually I did get one that yielded some kind of response. And it consisted of a curt chin lift and an instant head turn away from my direction. Oh. It's not that they didn't hear me. They're ignoring me. Hell, they're not even acknowledging me. This, my friends, was the first of many, many harsh experiences throughout that year of middle school. I'm sure a lot of us have had that old friend who we were so cool with before, suddenly pretending we don't even exist, and I'm sure it's left us all confused, dumbfounded, and sad. Like, just what happened? Was it something I said? Was it something I did? Was it that time I brought Johnny over to their place and did nothing but play their copy of Diamond while everyone else was enjoying each other's company? Or was it that time I pissed in their pool without them noticing? Okay, that didn't happen, but I was going through every possible heinous thing I had or could have done in the past year or so that would have explained this sudden shift in attitude, and I just couldn't find one. I still tried to talk with them like we normally would have, and the few times that we were able to have a normal conversation was when they weren't with their new friends. It was evident our friendship had changed whether I wanted it to or not. And it's not like there weren't signs. Our regular hangouts were becoming increasingly rarer after I started hanging out with Johnny, and there appeared to be a lack of enthusiasm on their end during whatever hangouts we managed to have. I specifically recall when they brought over a copy of Super Smash Bros. Brawl to show us and seemed very uninterested in being there, though I originally chalked that up to them not being interested in Smash. But what was probably the biggest indication of our crumbling friendship was when I brought over my copy of Mario Strikers Charge to their place, and they weren't even interested in playing that. The person who was such a big factor in getting me into video games and the person who got Strikers so that the two of us could play it together had no interest in its sequel. Unthinkable. But thinking about it more, I don't think it was Kirby losing interest in those games or just video games in general, maybe. It was probably Kirby losing interest in me. I had lost another friend, the only friend, to the winds of change. I don't resent them for it anymore. Like, I get it. Things like this can happen. But at the time, those winds came through when I least expected them to, and I was definitely not prepared. As a result, I ended up sinking myself further and further into my obsessions with Pokemon, for one, but also Charged. I may not have been able to finish all the tournaments, and it may not have had a season mode of its own, but that sure as hell didn't prevent me from making up one of my own, with all these stats that would come up with it: standings, wins, losses, numbers of goals scored, some of which I still have to this day, and would later repeat with Super Smash Bros. Brawl as I got further and further into high school. I still have these notebooks. I filled these pages to no end. It was a blast, and likely a coping mechanism. I have trouble deciding which. But the good news is, I was not destined to let these winds of change bog down the rest of that year, since I would not be completely friendless. Shortly after Kirby stopped talking to me and went on to hang with their new friends, I made new friends of my own, with people who both shared my interests and were in the same classes I had been in. And there was one person in particular who we'll call... Oh, I guess we'll just call him Bobby. They shared in my love for video games, and we would talk about them all the time, and they even had a PS3 that I'd get to play on the briefest of occasions, just fucking around in GTA 4, The Ballad of Gay Tony, and all sorts of other games, and our friendship would not end there. In fact, Bobby and I are still the best of friends to this day. Longtime viewers might know them from the Let's Play series we did on the Dead Gaming channel, but also them appearing in a few of my earlier videos. We don't talk about those. Bottom line, he was there when I needed a friend the most. And I'm eternally grateful for that. Y'all might think it's a bit silly and wholly unnecessary to recount this whole story that's, again, only vaguely associated with the subject at hand, but as I've said, we can't help what we associate with what and how those memories can change as we mature and grow, and it just so happens that I associate the first two Strikers games with some of the toughest yet most important phases of my life. Could have been any game, and there are other games involved too, but it was mostly these two. So I hope I was able to properly demonstrate how this psychological brain crap works without going into the specifics, because I am not well prepared for that. And let me know if y'all have any stories or memories of your own along these lines. I'd be more than happy to listen to them and get some perspective, and maybe clear up some misconceptions between how... Oh yeah. There's a third one. Okay, nope, sorry, we're not done here yet. In case this wasn't clear from the get-go, the true inspiration for this retrospective came from the announcement of the newest Mario Strikers game in February of last year, Mario Strikers Battle League. The first entry in this series in nearly 15 years. A lot of changes can happen in 15 years, like how we're in a completely different generation of consoles for Nintendo, thanks to their most recent and most successful console ever, the Switch. It did for Nintendo what the Wii had also done for them, bringing the company back from a major slump, which is doubly impressive considering the Wii U is probably their biggest mainline console failure ever. Meanwhile, Next Level were busy doing their own stuff, shunting out some licensed games, but still mostly working with Nintendo, who they'd work with exclusively following Luigi's Dark Mansion. That's not right. And be bought out by them in 2021. So yeah, that's a fair bit of change. But you know what's been probably the biggest change of them all for our heroes? Yeah, believe it or not, us humans go through a lot of changes from age 12 to 27, biologically and socially. During those long, arduous years, I got inspired to go into game development, started this YouTube series, graduated high school, graduated college, lost interest in game development, went into labor, I got a corporate job, tried to buy a home, failed to buy a home, settled with renting a home, and am currently dealing with all the aspects of life that any self-respecting adult normally would. And that's not all that's changed over the years, Gerald. While my interest in the Strikers games, and games in general, have not waned at all, those general interests have evolved and spread out over time. I got into visual novels, arcade racing games, Metroid fucking Prime, in addition to my expanding love for Zelda and bleeding love for Pokemon. But I could always find time to settle back into that Strikers groove, so I was pretty excited for this new entry. And in the weirdest coincidence in this whole video, I was actually playing through Mario Strikers on the soon-to-be-dead GameCube the week before Battle League's reveal. I took it as a sign that things were going to go pretty well following that announcement, until an update came directly from Nintendo that included the phrase, free post-launch updates. You know what else has changed in 15 years? Business strategies. DLC is nothing new, especially free DLC, but it was something Nintendo had been slowly embracing before going all in on that during this generation, and now a fair majority of their published games get some kind of DLC or free update. In some cases, they do it well. In other cases, they don't. Especially when certain titles launch with a base game that many view as, well, lacking. This is especially true with the sports games they've published, so seeing that Battle League was also going to be supported with these free updates did not make a lot of online folk happy. And also, they're still selling these games at $60 in this economy, so I understand the concern. I had already been burnt by these particular mess of expectations, thanks to Mario Golf Super Rush being a major disappointment in that regard. But I had different expectations for Battle League, as I'm sure you can gauge by this point. It wasn't just the free update path that worried me, though. I did have some concerns with how the game looked and what those new mechanics being shown off in the gameplay trailers were, so I'd gone from being very excited to being cautiously optimistic. And regardless of any of those concerns, I was dead set on playing Battle League the day it would be released into the world on June 10th, 2022. And that just so happened to be the day I moved out of my childhood home. Change is inevitable. Bear with me for a quick second here. I need y'all to put yourselves in my shoes and understand what emotions I had been going through during this time. I lived in the same home for all my life and was about to embark on a scary journey of singular responsibility. I could do it. I had been wanting to do it. But the second I was on my own, figuratively speaking, I could already feel the crushing weight of all those new responsibilities smothering me. I know not everyone has the same experience of if and when they move into their own living space. One could even argue I was rather privileged in my upbringing, although in actuality I was just really, really lucky. But the point is, those emotions were at the forefront of my mind during this move. And if you remember, those heightened emotions can lead to some weird associations with whatever items are just kind of laying around at the moment or I had been wanting to get into. Thanks to these circumstances, Battle League went unplayed for a good amount of time. And for the next month or so, whenever I saw it on this shelf, those emotions would bubble up to the surface and I'd just go and do something else. With the tacit reminder that I had still not played it yet and I will need to play it at some point in time. But those emotions go away eventually, right? And once I had fully settled in, set up all my gaming shit, tricked out my office, maybe I could get back around to it. Okay, maybe not a month, but I'm still getting some stuff together and I'm starting to go out with some local friends more frequently, and that's pretty fun. So once that's kind of calmed down, maybe I'll get to it then. You know what, let's make it until fall. I'm more comfortable with fall. It's my favorite season. Okay, maybe after Christmas. Okay, maybe after winter. Okay, maybe after allergies. Oh, okay, fine. Maybe after I'm done with the other videos I said I was gonna do, like right before I moved in here, and severely underestimated the work that would go into it, including this one. You are free to call me an incredibly silly man. I encourage you to. But that's what it felt like to me, and these are the majority of the emotions I have towards the game, and the memories I associate with it, all without even playing the fucking thing. We've come full circle, ladies and gentlemen. The biggest change in my life so far, leading into one of the most annoying memory associations of my life so far. And now the only thing left to do is to see if it was really worth all this mental trouble. Sadly, I don't have any other development history notes to go through before we get into the game proper. When the biggest thing I found was the previous game's director commenting on how the game looked and potential ideas that were previously abandoned by them now being incorporated into Battle League, I knew that I wasn't going to find anything more interesting. Which may as well be an indication that development had gone as expected. Maybe we'll see some more development notes in the future, or maybe not. I don't know. I've done too much with this video already. I ain't reaching out to those dang Canadians to question the decision to omit Daisy in the initial character lineup. Okay, I never really played as her, but it's a weird omission for them to have made. She would eventually get added via one of those free updates I was talking about though, and for the record, the version I'm playing includes all of the new characters and stages and other stuff added in from those free updates, which lasted for 6 months after the game's release, and nothing since. This is what I was talking about earlier. Nintendo can get real iffy with DLC. Anyway, how does video game play? What different about it? The basic gameplay still remains, the same kind of 5-on-5 combat soccer match you've come to expect, and whoever scores the most goals is the winner. Overtime for tied matches works a bit differently now. Instead of whoever gets the next goal wins, and the match potentially goes on forever, the teams are now given 2 minutes to have either them make the golden goal, or the match will end in a tie. Like with Charge though, the first real difference is noticeable from the get-go, as you are no longer restricted to 1 captain and 3 sidekicks. Now you can choose any of these players for your team roster, and they have all these kinds of varying stats that are more varied than the previous iterations. At first, I was a little disappointed here because this just does away with sidekicks completely, but then I realized that this was if all the teams were composed of captains, and I can already envision the chaotic mess that would ensue, so I was on board. Also, some of the characters here can have more than one of the same type on a team, so you can at least make a full team of Yoshis if your heart desires. Thank you very much. Getting into a game lets us feel up the other new mechanics, and these took a bit longer for me to be on board with. The ball no longer has the visible strength indicator from Charge, and getting strong shots in here is not quite as simple as the perfect pass from the first game. You have to time your passes exactly to up the ball's strength, and then you have to time your shot just right to get it to its maximum power. And I'm not sure if it was just me, but the window to time them shots correctly seems a lot smaller than it should be, and so I was not making a lot of great shots. There is an extensive tutorial that explains how this is supposed to work, but it still took me a while to get accustomed to, although I do appreciate that you're now able to directly aim your shot at the goal. Moving around the field has gone through some changes too. Sprinting has always been a feature in the series, but it was never super necessary to use when shooting a quick pass or lob pass to another player would do just fine. Here, it has never been more important, because even with the fastest characters, the default run speed feels a lot slower than it had been before, and while the fields themselves are much smaller than they have been before, that ends up leaving more opportunities for scoring, and despite a change-up in the goalie character, Boom Boom here is just as, if not more inconsistent with defense than the Kremling was. You need to use sprint to get to any loose balls and hold on to the ball for as long as you can, so that the opposing team doesn't get any chances to score. The biggest change, however, is what they did with tackling. Previously, a simple button press or flick of the wrist was all that was needed to slam into opponents and knock the ball out of their possession. Here, while you can still press a button for a quick tackle, depending on how high the opponent's strength stat is, your character will often bounce off of them like nothing even happened. You need to pull off a more powerful tackle, and you can do that by holding down the tackle button to allow it to charge whilst aiming in the direction of the tackle receiver. If you connect, it does the job, and you'll gain the ball too if you charge and release right as the meter is filled up. But if you miss, or the opponent dodges, your character will fall flat on their face and they have to take a few precious seconds to dust themselves off before they're playable again. Out of all the changes, this is probably my least favorite. To me, it just feels really clunky, and even after I got used to it, I never felt like I was doing it right. One thing's for sure though, these new change-ups go a long way in giving Battle League the most technically complex gameplay in the series. The additions in charge did make the experience a bit more varied, but they're still very simple, all things considered. You can forego any sense of strategy and get by with just mindlessly passing the ball around, taking shots at any opportunity. No thanks to PD. That is kind of the case here with Battle League 2, but it did feel like the game was trying to push me outside of my comfort zone and force me to start playing smarter, become more aware of what's happening on the field at all times, and use that to my advantage. And these changes didn't just end with the body slams. Items are no longer awarded to teams automatically following a foul or a good shot. Instead, there are varying types of item blocks that are tossed onto the field by the audience, and now need to be manually picked up. Same goes for this game's version of the Super Strike or Mega Strike, as this glowing orb will fall onto the field at random moments throughout the match, and whoever picks it up allows any one of their team players to perform a Hyper Strike. It works the exact same way as it did in the first Strikers game. You just try to get the needle into either the green or orange areas of this meter, and if you pull it off, you get 2 points. Provided the goalie doesn't manage to counter it via a button mash QuickTime event. Although hitting both green areas allows it to just go into the goal without any trouble whatsoever, which is always hilarious. I have to imagine I wasn't the only Strikers veteran former Strikers veteran, who had trouble adjusting to this. Hell, some of the reviews were comparing the overall feel of the game to something akin to a fighting game. And call me crazy, I was getting some Smash vibes. But I still think it's pretty good. I won't blame anyone who finds this congealed gameplay format to be too complicated, or any newcomers who are thrown off at what seems to be a pretty simple soccer game, but god damn it, those Canadians did it again. It works. If you can adjust to the weird control method and mesh with the groove, it plays just as smoothly as previous games did, and these more strategic elements actually make the gameplay the most balanced and fair it's ever been. Yes, shots are still RNG driven, but being able to determine where that shot will land is such a great addition, and pulling off those supercharged tackles or dodges and being rewarded with a short burst of speed or the ball itself makes for such a great incentive to keep playing that way and improving your skills in that area. The best part though? The matches are still as chaotic as they've ever been. Maybe even more so thanks to that smaller field size, so if you still want to play like a stupid motherfucker, you are more than welcome to. We might be back to having stages that only differentiate between each other aesthetically, and not everyone's favorite character has returned here, but I can confirm that this Strikers game very much plays like Mario Strikers. And you know, I could also complain about the lack of item variety, the music not really hitting as hard, and the replays now looking like complete dog shit. What the hell happened here? But the game still looks pretty lively and colorful, and it's just full of personality. Take any of the Hyper Strikes, for example, or any of the victory celebrations. Look how smooth they made Wario eating that piece of garlic. Look at how joyful they made Yoshi, and look at how sassy they made Birdo. Sheesh, you know what hasn't changed in the last 15 years? Is Canadians being horny for Birdo. Now that it's been established that the gameplay is still, in fact, pretty good, it's time to look at the modes that Next Level have created to allow us single players to utilize that gameplay. So what we have here are the cup battles, and are we even surprised at this point? Yep, for the third time, there's not a whole lot of single player content in Battle League. And those cup battles are somehow less substantial than the ones from the first game. You pick your team and you're just shunted right into a tournament bracket. No standings beforehand, it's World Cup time, baby! It works as you'd expect, although if you lose a match during your tournament run, it doesn't end right away, as they'll just throw you into the losers bracket, which gives you a second chance to make the final, so that's nice. But you do get something for winning cups this time, besides a trophy or therapy. Coins! And what can these coins be used for? Buying equipment to change up the stats for your teams. Headgear, arm gear, leg gear, chest gear. The choice is yours, because there's a lot of them. Does this mean you'll have to grind? Yes. Is it actually useful? Yes. Elsewhere. Not here though. Okay, scratch that. It is useful here because it helped me breeze through the majority of these cups without so much as a dent. Looks like they learned their lesson with Chars and toned down the difficulty, but maybe they toned it down a bit too much. Even the supposedly tougher Galactic Cups didn't pose a challenge to Yoshi and crew here at all. At least until the Championship Cup, where I got my ass handed to me by a group of fucking shy guys. Multiple times! In another nice change though, if you do get kicked out of the tournament because you lose too many times, you can now pay a measly fee in coins that will allow you to replay the current match. See, this is what Charge needed, so I wouldn't have had to resort to exploitation. So what if that fee does stack up if you lose too many times? I was still able to manage a win fair and square. So eat it! But anyways, as I'm sure y'all should know by now, Strikers is always best played with multiple people. And yeah, local multiplayer is as fun as you'd expect, even with the new complexities in gameplay. There's also online multiplayer options similar to what you'd find in Charge, but the hot new mode Next Level whipped up to breathe new life into the series and fulfill its subtitle is the Battle League mode. Oh, sorry, the Strikers Club mode. Here you can create or join a league of up to 20 players and compete with other leagues in however many matches you can manage to fit in a 3 to 4 day season. Regardless of whether you win or lose, you get points that contribute to your league's ranking, as well as both coins and these silver bolts, the latter of which can be used to purchase custom stuff for your league, like what the goalpost looks like, who will be in the stands cheering you on, and what the endgame fireworks will look like. Pretty exciting stuff, wouldn't you say? Well, I first joined a pre-existing club, and I got my behind thwomped into the ground during the very first match I partook in, and when I went to check the division rankings, one of the top teams was... However, after a few more matches, I started getting into that same groove I got into playing the cups, and that balancing act I was talking about earlier applies here as well. Matches seem much fairer than I would have ever expected them to be, and not everyone playing this mode appears to have gotten used to the mechanics yet. Thanks to this, I ended up getting to a lot of really fun matches, some of which I made the opponent quit well before it was over because I guess I'm just that good. Soon after, I ended up forming a battle league of my very own, and spent a few good weeks plowing through more matches and pretty much carrying the league, because even though these two random bozos joined in, they did jack and shit. But hey, they joined, and I think that's the takeaway. A year on and people are still playing it rather frequently. Unless these are all bots, though I'm not convinced Nintendo knows what bots are. Overall, yeah, I like Battle League. In fact, I don't know if this is going to be a controversial take, but I would put it above the first game. And I don't think it's much of a contest either. Obviously, it's not better than Chars, it's not nearly as varied, even if I believe some of the deeper mechanics do make up for that, but it also has the same issues that have persisted in the series from the very beginning. The biggest barrier to entry, though, is that sweet, long-lasting Nintendo-sanctioned full price that will never, ever go down outside of sales. But I think Next Level did another good job here for what this is. Review-wise, it did about the same as the previous games, and sales-wise, it's on track to be the best-selling game in the Striker series, which isn't very surprising considering it's on the Switch, but it's impressive in its own right, isn't it? In any case, I could easily imagine my 12-year-old self loving the shit out of Battle League just as they did with Charge, making up their own standings and tournament matches and other strange coping mechanisms. They would have a blast. 27-year-old me, however, is comfortable with leaving the game as is. As far as each game's quality goes, removing the rose-tinted glasses, they're much closer to each other than I initially realized. I do think they are some of the best Mario sports games around, although they are best experienced with other people. I'd recommend giving Chars a shot first, as it's easily the best of the three, but really any of them will do, including Battle League. I've got so much love for this series, and I hold the memories connected with them very near and dear to my heart. But maybe I'm being too soft on these games, because that's what these memories are. just memories. I can be as nostalgic as I want for my childhood, as well as find all the time in the world to reminisce about it in this very video, but I'm no longer that kid who played this to no end. I'll admit, I didn't come into this video expecting an actual theme to develop beyond how that external stimuli can affect our memories in the weirdest of ways, but, well, as I've been saying, change is inevitable. When it happens, how long it will take for it to happen, and for when it will end, what exactly the change is, and who it affects, yeah, it can't all be easily determined, but change of some sort eventually happens. And it ain't just inevitable, it's vague, it's weird, sometimes it's scary, sometimes it's welcome, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's indecipherable, and sometimes it's absent. But what truly matters is how one responds to that change. And take it from me, some changes are easier to adjust to than others. This park certainly hasn't changed, and while I'm sure it won't be for a good while, well, that could change. As could my living situation, or the status of this channel, or my thoughts on the Strikers games at any point in the future. Change may be inevitable, but at the very least, it can be manageable. So regardless of whatever struggles you'll encounter through these changes, I think you can still come out of the other side and keep moving forward. Something I'm sure that Haven, Bobby, Johnny, and Kirby would know all about too. Oh yeah, Kirby. I bet you're wondering whatever happened to Kirby, the person who got me into these dang games and whose plot thread we left hanging a bit to do an anime time skip. Well, if you were expecting a happy ending with that story, sorry to disappoint, we haven't talked to each other since high school. I went on to do my own thing, they went on to do their own thing. And I have come to learn that those years were a lot more painful for them than mine had been. But at the very least, it seems like they're a lot happier where they are now, and I hope that they're still doing well where they are now. In Florida. As the saying goes, the more that things change, the more they stay the same.